The story moves us deep into a dark forest where a mysterious girl named Victoria sat on the cold and damp ground. She was dressed in a black cloak. Victoria was together with her friend Stein. In her hand, she held a knife, with which she made neat incisions across her comrade's shoulder joint. After only a few minutes of effort, Victoria had already amputated Stein's right arm. She reported that we need to be more careful. "Monster!" Stein said. Victoria said to play the weak and wounded man, "Or you're out of the village." I hope you realize that. Not far from the forest was a small village, which is nice in its own way. In this village lived a little boy named Joshua along with his sister. On this day, little Joshua was sad. He sat alone on a hill covered with thick green grass. He was approached by an elder who noticed that Joshua looked sad. She had long white hair. She asked him, "Is something wrong?" Joshua replied that he had overslept and forgot to watch the cattle. So Uncle Baker was angry with him. The girl downloaded that Uncle Baker is strict because he does his best to make good meat available to everyone. In addition to feed and water, other factors affect meat. There are quite a few things to consider, in particular, living conditions and the presence of stress. "Shall we do our best to give our sister a good meal?" suggested the elder. Joshua and his sister walked to the center of the village to the market where they could buy a variety of delicious cookies with almost any filling. As they approached the market, they saw a crowd of people, including their sister Anna and the hunters. They were discussing something about what they had seen on the last hunt. As soon as little Joshua saw his little sister, he ran to her at the same instant. "Are you all right? Are you hurt?" Joshua asked as he ran up to his sister. She answered that she was fine. But David and Uncle William. Anna began to talk about the last hunt with David and Uncle William and Uncle Marcus. It was a clear day. The sun was shining brightly. They split into two groups. They used to go hunting together in this forest. There's a lot of wildlife here. As they moved deeper into the forest, they heard the loud roar of an unknown creature. Everything around them trembled. It was a big bang, Uncle Marcus said. The girl was terrified, and she noticed that the ground shook. A few seconds later, they heard a voice that cried out for help. This voice was quite familiar. It was Uncle William, whose voice our heroine immediately recognized. Our heroes immediately ran in the direction of the scream. As they approached, their faces were horrified at what they saw. "What is it?" Uncle Marcus asked in a trembling voice. David and Uncle William. They were lying on the ground and did not move. Their bodies were bloody from numerous wounds. "They're dead." Uncle Maurice raised his gun higher. Some stranger, David and Uncle William's killer, came out of the bushes. It was not a man. He was huge and tall, his face impossible to see. His eyes and hair emitted some kind of light, like a lightning discharge. Uncle Marcus shouted to the creature, "Don't come any closer," and immediately fired off his shotgun. The unknown man dodged the bullet as if it were some kind of insect. "It's the monster!" Anna screamed in terror. "We have to run away from here." After these words, Uncle Marcus grabbed the frightened girl by the arm and ran towards the village, dragging her behind him. Uncle William and little brother David, they're gone. Anna couldn't believe herself. Joshua cried, feeling sorry for what had happened. He couldn't believe himself that he would never see Uncle William and David again. I ran as fast as I could. Anna continued her story, and by some miracle I managed to escape. The creature's head, ears, and limbs were not animal-like. It was a monster in human form. In fact, it's best not to go into the woods today. Unfortunately, it's impossible to recover the bodies of the two dead. Uncle Marcus made a good point. Little Joshua was very curious about the creature. He asked his Uncle Marcus, "What kind of monster was it? Was it a werewolf?" "No, I don't think so," Uncle Marcus answered. Joshua was scared. He didn't know what to do next. What if the monster is heading toward the village? He asked Uncle Marcus. "Maybe we should leave the village as soon as possible," he said. The older sister began to calm her brother down. "Joshua, have you forgotten? There are werewolves lurking in the forest that surrounds the village. Once you enter their territory, you'll be like a fish on a chopping board, helpless. But don't worry, we're safe. The village has the blessing of the mountain god. Until now, it's what has allowed us to live our lives in peace. As long as we're here, everything will be fine," the girl said confidently, which reassured Joshua. "What we really need to do now is hold a feast in honor of the mountain god to keep his blessing." The white-haired girl addressed the crowd. "The day after tomorrow, there will be a festival to worship the mountain god." The crowd supported the girl. They recognized that she was right, that the focus should now be on making the feast a success. With the blessing of the mountain god, they would all be safe. And then everyone turned their gaze to Anna. She felt sick and started to fall to the ground, but Uncle Maris managed to catch her with his hands. "She must be tired from the shock," he added. "Anna, you need to rest. The adults will take care of everything." Uncle Marcus began to reassure the girl, who was very worried about the dead. "What about Uncle William and David?" she asked. "We can't take their bodies now, but we will later, and give them a proper burial. This village is like one big family, and you have to trust your family," said Uncle Marcus. He asked Anna not to worry so much about the village. He said he would take the strongest and toughest men to carry the watch. The uncle told the girl to be better prepared for the feast, like the other boys. It got dark. Night had fallen. Anna is feeling much better now. She decided to chill out. She was still thinking about her brother David, who, back in the woods, had warned Anna of an important conversation after the hunt. But that conversation would no longer take place. Remembering her brother made Anna sad. How she longed to see David again. She cried. In the meantime, morning had come. The villagers actively began to prepare for the holiday. The children were sitting outside the house peeling potatoes. They felt very sorry for the dead and for Anna, who was grieving for them. Suddenly they hear a joyful voice. They looked up and saw a joyful little girl smiling at them. It was Anna, holding some kind of basket and saying that they had much to do. And Uncle William and David would watch over them from heaven. The children could not believe that Anna had become so light and joyful overnight. She is a strong girl. A few minutes later, the children heard someone screaming and running towards them. They looked up and saw the boy, their friend, who told them that the sentries had caught suspicious people wandering near the village. Elder and Uncle Marcus wanted to find out who it was. There were two of them. Among them was a very tall adult male who was wearing a dark hooded cloak. He was accompanied by a child also wearing a black cloak. Almost all the villagers had gathered to watch the strangers the sentries had caught. "Where did you come from and what do you want here?" asked the elder. "Who we are and where we come from is none of your business," the child replied rudely. The elder apologized for the way the outsiders were treated. "We don't care about you. As it happens, we have to pass through your village to continue on our way," said the child. "Therefore, everyone who approaches the village will be searched," said the elder. "This is because recently, in the forest, someone killed 2 of our villagers," the elder added. "What a hassle." A disgruntled child expressed his opinion. Nothing suspicious was found when the child was searched. Now it's the big guy's turn. The unknown man never uttered a word, never showed his face. His arm and body were wrapped in bandages. He reached for his hood and flicked the cloak off his body. The man was wrapped in bandages from head to toe. You could only see one eye, hair, and mouth. He was also missing his right arm. Everyone was horrified. No one had ever seen anything like this before. "Who is this man?" Uncle Marcus asked. "My relative," replied the child. "He's ex-military. More than 10 years ago, he participated in a war against werewolves and was severely wounded. His whole body was badly scarred, and those wounds still bleed sometimes. The child told me. Tell me, have you ever seen a humanoid creature in the forest?" the elder asked. "What are we talking about? Werewolves or something?" "No, we haven't," the child answered clearly. "Why were you wandering around the village?" the elder inquired. "Well, the village is surrounded by a wooden wall, so we walked along it to get around it," the child answered. "Are you satisfied? It's time to let us go," said the child. The elder had to disappoint them. She said she was sorry, but they would not be released. "We'd like you to stay here until the feast tomorrow. Tomorrow is the village's big celebration, and we can't tolerate the uncertainty of tomorrow," the villagers said. The elder said he would give the strangers food and a roof over their heads. The child was not thrilled that they would be locked up, taken into custody, and watched over. "Wow, what a big guy," said someone in the crowd. "It's very creepy looking." "He scares me," said a little girl in the crowd. As promised by the elder, the strangers were given a roof over their heads with 2 bunks. Sitting locked up is very boring. At that moment, our heroes heard a knock on the door. It was Joshua. He brought 2 bowls of hot soup. One of the strangers is still hesitant to try the food. "Aren't you going to eat?" little Joshua asked the man in the raincoat. He can't speak. His throat is damaged. "If you want to ask me something, ask me," said the child. No. "No way!" The children were forbidden to talk to strangers, Joshua answered. "You could have just left the food and walked away. But you stayed and talked to us." The kid made a good point. "It would be great if you stayed and we could have a little chat. I don't know why you're so afraid. We've been cooperative, haven't we?" "My name is Victoria." "His name is Stein. What's your name?" "I'm Joshua," the boy answered uncertainly. "So we've met." "Victoria, that's a girl's name," Joshua asked. "Well, I'm a girl," Victoria replied with a smile. "Uh-oh, I'm sorry." Joshua felt a little embarrassed. "What a remote village you have," Victoria shared. "That's the truth. We don't trade with anyone. We have our own subsistence farm. The village is located in the middle of the forest. You could say we are isolated from the outside world," said Joshua sadly. "I admit I really wanted to talk to you. After all, this is the first time you've been strangers since I've been here. Me and my sister, we're not from this village. 3 years ago, my family and I drove through this forest. We sat and laughed and read books. Suddenly, we stopped abruptly. The whole place shook. We were scared. We didn't know what it was. There was someone on the roof of the carriage. At that moment, a head peeked out at us, dark as the earth, with long ears and covered in thick fur. We've already realized. We were attacked by werewolves. We all screamed. We were gripped by a great fear. We were terrified. And then the head disappeared. But after that, the whole carriage shook. The werewolf turned the carriage over. I was lying on the ground, unable to move. My whole body ached. That was the day my family died. The last thing I saw was werewolves eating my relatives. Then my sister and I passed out. When we came to our senses, it turned out that we had been rescued by the villagers. We've been living here ever since, under the protection and care of this village. The villagers welcomed us with joy. They became a new family for us. All the children here are orphans with no one left and nowhere else to go. So you don't have to worry so much. They're all good people. You will be released as soon as the party is over, said Joshua. The boy's story reminded Victoria of a man. He didn't have a home either. The man had to live in a small village. Although he was a stranger, he contributed to the development of the village with his knowledge of medicine and gradually earned the respect of the villagers. He had warm relations with everyone in the village, almost like relatives. What was the result? This man was burned in the village square. How awful, Joshua said quietly. So you have to draw conclusions. There are two kinds of people in this world. One is the enemy, and those who are not yet. You have to be careful, because even family and friends can one day become your enemies. That's why the most important thing in this world is strength. That can crush your current and future enemies. At that moment, the door opens abruptly. Anna runs into the stable shouting, "Joshua, what are you doing? Didn't the elder forbid talking to these people?" Anna continued to shout after she grabbed Joshua's arm. There are werewolves and witches in human form outside the village, killing and eating people. You shouldn't listen to strangers. Any stranger could be a stranger in disguise. A monster. "Come on," says Anna. Don't let their words fool you. At this time, residents are preparing for the holiday. In a few minutes, everything is ready. The festivities in the village have begun. What kind of holiday do they have? Victoria wondered. Abruptly, the doors to the stable open. Uncle Marcus walks in and says there's a job for the big guy. "What job?" "What about me?" Victoria asked. "And you're staying here," Marcus replied. At that time, Anna was at home. She heard a knock on the door. On the doorstep, she saw Uncle Marcus, who said that due to the holiday, it was our turn. The hunters' turn to patrol the area. Originally, that responsibility was David's, but now that he's gone, you'll have to do your best. "Don't be afraid," said Uncle Marcus. "I'll go with you." "Oh yes. We'll also have that huge captured man with us. Here comes the Sentinel Patrol." There was only forest around. Ahead of our heroes was a very narrow trail with a cliff on the right, but they didn't stop and moved on. This man showed up here right after that monster showed up. Strangers don't usually come here, Anna thought in her head. That man is definitely suspicious. He must have something to do with that monster. Of course, he's missing one arm. Anna continued to speculate. Anna forgot caution for a moment and stumbled. She was no longer touching the ground, though she didn't realize it herself yet. She fell. She screamed throughout the forest. But then the fall stopped. Someone grabbed her arm. It was a big guy. He easily pulled the girl off the cliff as if it weighed nothing at all. "Thank you," Anna said in surprise. At that moment, someone's hand with a knife appeared from behind the big guy. She slit his throat. The big guy was bleeding. He didn't know what was happening. Anna's scared. The big man grabbed his throat to stop the bleeding and quietly backed up to the cliff. Bam! Someone kicked the big guy and threw him off the cliff. It was Uncle Marcus. He was standing by the cliff with a shotgun behind his back. "Why?" asked Anna with horror on her face. "That is the elder's order. That man could cause trouble for the village?" Uncle Marcus replied. "He saved me," said Anna. "He did it so that we could trust him," said Marcus. "Everyone in the village is one big family, and family should be trusted more than strangers. If that's the case, they must already know who we are. So there's no point in hiding our true identities anymore. This kid's been in contact with David. I think they wanted to take him with them," said Uncle Robert. "You and William should have dealt with them the day before yesterday, and you put it off until after the party. You don't live up to your name." "Marcus," Robert added. Anna didn't understand a word. What are they talking about? The girl thought. In that instant, something was wrong with Uncle Robert and Uncle Marcus. They screamed in pain. Hair began to grow dramatically from their skin. Teeth and noses grew. Anna stood in horror. What was happening? They started turning into monsters. They started turning into werewolves. Two huge werewolves stood in front of Anna. They looked at her with hungry eyes. "That monster killed William, so I had to kill him," one of the werewolves said. "Let's hurry up and eat little Anna," said the other werewolf. In the same second, Anna scattered and jumped off the cliff into the dense forest, hoping to escape into the trees. She jumped. "I can't believe it," said one of the werewolves. She decided to jump to increase her chances of survival. "But at our speed, it won't do her any good. I wouldn't expect anything less from her. She's my apprentice," Marcus the werewolf said. Meanwhile, the stable was still guarded, except there's no one left to guard. The room was empty. Victoria climbed out the window and was already sitting on the roof. There are werewolves lurking in the village. The question is, who are they? How naive and stupid he is. He thinks that everyone in the village is a good person. He's blinded by the peaceful peaceful ordinariness of his surroundings. He doesn't even notice the danger that lurks nearby. In the future, those who are unable to face reality will inevitably die, Victoria reasoned. The story brings us back to Anna again. She is alive. She ran to the village. Uncle Robert and Uncle Marcus turned out to be werewolves. I just can't believe it, Anna reasoned. Could there be werewolves lurking among the villagers? Joshua, how's he doing? She ran and screamed with all her might, but no matter how hard she tried, werewolves are faster than humans, and one of them caught up with the girl. I had my eye on you the moment you showed up in the village. You smell so nice. I hope you taste wonderful, too. At that moment, someone runs out of the bushes and punches the werewolf that was sitting on Anna. It was the big guy. He's alive. He punched the werewolf in the face, and he was blown away like the wind. Anna looked up and couldn't believe her eyes. What? He's alive? How did he manage to survive? These were the only questions on the girl's mind. Stein looked at the poor girl. There was no point in hiding any longer. He grabbed the cloak with his hand and threw it to the ground. The big guy started ripping all the bandages off his face and body. There were flasks on Stein's back that produced an electric discharge. After a while, he was already covered in electric current. That's him, said the werewolves. There was a monster standing in front of them. The same creature that killed Uncle William and David, said Anna. Monster, that hurt, said the werewolf as he came to his senses after being hit by the monster. But why is he still alive? After all, the wound on his neck was fatal. Let's keep our guard up. Whether he's a man or a monster, doesn't matter. He'll be held accountable. After he said that, the werewolf went after Stein, and then he paid the price. Stein swung and made a kick that sent the werewolf flying far forward. The werewolf Marcus threw his rifle off his shoulder and threw himself into the fray. Stein electrified his fist, and as the werewolf approached, he delivered a devastating blow. The werewolf Marcus squealed in pain. He was struck down. Stein had one last strike to kill the werewolf. But all of a sudden, Anna grabbed the gun and pointed it at Stein. She's scared, doesn't know what to do. The werewolf started begging the girl to shoot, to do some damage to the monster. He began to say that once he was done, she would be next. I'm Marcus, the one who took care of you all the time until today. Have you forgotten? Shoot the monster that killed David. It's your only chance to avenge him. The werewolf spoke in a quiet voice. It was time to avenge David. Anna couldn't concentrate. She couldn't figure out what to do. Meanwhile, in the village, everyone is immersed in the festivities, dancing and singing around the fire. I brought you some food, Joshua said, and went into Victoria's stable. That's a strange costume you're wearing, Victoria said with a smirk. It's a holiday outfit. All children should dress up like that, replied the boy. Victoria thanked the boy for the food. She noticed that he had brought a portion of stew for Stein, too. They'd gone somewhere with Uncle Marcus, hadn't they? Joshua said. Patrolling isn't easy. Besides, it was getting dark. Everyone has worked so hard. I hope the mountain god gives us his blessing, said Joshua. I was wondering what the holiday was all about, Victoria asked. It only happens once every 4 years, and on it they sacrifice the harvest of the last 4 years, and in return, they receive protection from calamities. In fact, it is more like a feast, with dancing and merriment, and at the end of the festival, there's a ritual in a sacred place, where the mountain god dwells. True, Joshua said he had no idea what went on during the ritual. Can you take me to this sacred place? Victoria asks. No, Joshua replies. That's not allowed. No one but her reverend elder is allowed to go near the sacred place. Besides, you're not allowed to leave here yet. You bastard! Victoria shouted. Then she jumped toward Joshua with a sharpened piece of iron in her hand. She put it to the boy's neck. You have an excuse to go to the sacred place. Otherwise, I will slit your throat. But first we need to go to the dried-up well. Victoria made the boy twist the handle of the well to get the bucket from the bottom. As soon as they got the bucket out, Victoria knocked it over, and some items fell out of it. They were Victoria's things, including knives. The day before the villagers captured us, I hid these things here, and then I went on to gather information, said Victoria. So this whole conversation was about gathering information? What do you want with our village? Joshua asked. And then Victoria jumped up to the boy and threw something in his mouth. He swallowed it. When asked what she gave him, she said it might be poison. No one knows, so if he wants the antidote, he can go with her. They came to a cliff where there was a large and dark cave. Our heroes walked into it. Forgive me, your reverend. I have entered a sacred place, Joshua spoke quietly. When they walked a little further, they saw a human skull on the ground. It had been there for a long time. Why is there a human skull in a sacred place? The boy asked fearfully. It looks like someone did something to it, Victoria answered. What they saw was breathtaking. They didn't know what or who was in front of them. It was a giant werewolf sitting on the cold ground. He was in some kind of deep sleep. On his head were some metal modifications and many human bones were lying around. Our heroes were terrified. They didn't understand anything. So many questions in their minds. Why is there this monster in a sacred place? Joshua wondered. Joshua, a voice came from the darkness. No one is allowed to enter the sacred place. It was the elder. Why did you come here? She asked. You realize the gravity of your sin. Don't you? Someone's footsteps could be heard behind them. These are the elder's assistants. Huh? You were so concerned about our infiltration that you completely ignored the monster that is here. That's ridiculous, said Victoria. That's because this is your beloved mountain god, and they were probably going to feed all the children to him, including you. The food you brought contained anesthetics prepared by the witch. After taking them, you would soon fall into a deep sleep. Don't worry, Joshua, Victoria said. I gave you the neutralizer. The average person wouldn't notice. But I used to be a healer, and I know almost everything about witches' potions. Apparently, this region has been under attack by werewolves for years. I've heard something about these attacks. Only bits of uneaten flesh and bone are ever left at the scenes. But why has no one ever managed to find anything resembling the remains of children? And here's another question. How come there are so many orphans in a remote village? Joshua was horrified. He'd been blindsided by the good life all this time. Joshua, the elder shouted, don't believe any of this nonsense. What that foreign woman is saying. But it was as if Joshua didn't hear her, didn't hear anything. He just froze in place. His thoughts were jumbled in his head. You are so easily influenced, said the elder. Increased perspiration, increased heart rate, disturbed breathing patterns. 3 years of careful nurturing gone to waste because you managed to get extremely stressed just before the ritual. And now the quality of the meat isn't good enough. Now we can't present you to the mountain god. I was raised like cattle, Joshua cried. It's all true. He couldn't believe it. No more wasting time. It's time for the ritual, said the elder. Get rid of them. The mountain god and I have an arrangement. In return for an offering that satisfies him, we receive a blessing. For the past 10 years, we have crushed anyone who dared to challenge us. As long as the mountain god is with us, we have nothing to fear. Seize them, the elder shouted. Hey, there's no need to be in such a hurry. Why don't we just sit down and talk about this? Victoria suggested. At that minute, the two assistants began to turn into werewolves. Their eyes grew larger. Thick fur appeared on their skin. Wolf ears, nose and mouth grew. Victoria pulled out her knives without a second thought and lunged at the werewolves. She slammed them into the werewolves' throats before they even realized what was happening. Come on, Victoria shouted. Mountain god, I ask you to lend me your power, the elder asked politely. Victoria and Joshua ran with all their might. They didn't even turn around. And then Joshua falls and drops his friend's thing. He started crying. The boy can't believe this is all happening. After all, it turns out it was all an act. Forget about what happened. Take that drug, sleep soundly, and let them eat you, said Victoria. I don't have to help you at all. If you want to live, fight and protect yourself. Oh, no, they're not. It's a werewolf. He lunged at Victoria, but she managed to bounce away. But the werewolf was very angry. He threw himself at the girl again, and there, bang, on the head, little Joshua. He took his will in his fist and struck the werewolf's head with a heavy blow. I'll fight, Joshua shouted. I believed in you, said Victoria. After the impact, the object opened slightly. Is that a hand? Scared Joshua. Calm down, said Victoria. What's that? Is it just me? Or did the cave really shake? Victoria wondered. The ground beneath their feet shook. They woke him up. In the darkness, a silhouette began to emerge. A very large silhouette. Run outside! Victoria shouted at the top of her voice. The so-called mountain god? He has decided to deal with those who have disrupted the ritual over the past decade. It's the mountain god, the boy shouted fearfully. Run and don't turn around, Victoria said. They had already seen the light. They were approaching the exit of the cave. Where the hell have you been? Victoria screamed. Stein, he was nearby and waiting. This was all their plan. The mountain god had almost caught up with Victoria. She ran with all her might. She called out for her friend, Stein. The big guy didn't think long and jumped off the cliff straight at the giant werewolf. Stein was already preparing his punch to hit the target. Victoria was terrified. He punched the werewolf right in the face. He wasn't expecting that. Almost late, Victoria said with a smirk. Stein fought the mountain god to the death. Joshua watched apprehensively. He was surprised. Someone is fighting the mountain god. Is that possible? The boy wondered. Joshua, someone shouted from the side of the hill. Turning around, the boy saw his sister Anna running up the hill. They ran to meet each other. They hugged each other and squeezed each other really hard. Sister, I was so worried about you, Joshua cried. Her reverend said she was rid of you. Joshua, I shot him, Anna said with a serious look on her face. I memorized that wolf face. I took a shot. It was you. You were the werewolf that killed my dad and mom that day, Anna screamed. One silver bullet was enough to take down the werewolf Marcus. He fell dead. After the shot, Anna fell to her knees and cried, Mommy, Daddy, she said, to the village. Hurry, Stein said in a hoarse voice and held out his hand to the girl. So Uncle Marcus was the werewolf that killed our parents? Joshua got sad. Most likely all the adults in the village are werewolves. This village was a farm where we were raised like cattle, said Anna. From behind Joshua, someone attacked him sharply. Victoria managed to deflect the blow. It was a werewolf with long white hair. Wearing a white dress, Joshua immediately collapsed in horror, fear gripping him. Could it really be her reverend? The boy wondered. Strangers, why do you interfere in our affairs? What is your purpose? The elder werewolf shouted. It doesn't matter anymore. The mountain god is our guardian. He will protect us. He will crush any enemy like an insect. Your keeper? Victoria asked. You don't know who he is. I'll tell you. More than a decade ago, there was a war in which werewolves and witches fought against humans. After 3 years of fierce fighting, the humans were on the verge of defeat. However, the human weapon created by Dr. Frankenstein was able to change this situation. They were monsters. The monsters had tremendous power. Thanks to them, the humans managed to defeat the werewolf army. However, their own troops also suffered considerable losses. At the end of the war, Frankenstein disappeared along with the monsters, and then, here and there, monsters began to appear that had been modified with Dr. Frankenstein's technology. So both your mountain god and the monster are monsters that Dr. Frankenstein created, and you call that monster a god? You make me laugh. Well, if you consider the mountain god your guardian god, then you can consider Stein the god of destruction. After saying that, Stein fell to the ground near Victoria's feet. Stein, don't embarrass me, said Victoria. It's nobody. Speak, said Victoria, but the big man couldn't say a word. Something was stopping him. His throat was damaged. It was cut, said Anna. But on examination, they saw that the wound had healed. At that moment, a noise was heard behind the backs of our heroes. It was coming from the direction of the village. These are the villagers. From what Victoria could see, she counted at least 30 adults. And if they're all werewolves, they're in a lot of trouble. I have a plan, said Victoria. Since they crave their god so much, we'll give it to them. That's your god? Screamed the elder werewolf. He looks like he's about to die. As long as Victoria lives, I am immortal, said Stein. After saying those words, Stein ripped his arm from Joshua's grasp and joined his body. Victoria began to heal Stein's arm with magic. Everyone around me was surprised. Are you a witch? Joshua asked. It's done. Make it quick, Stein, Victoria screamed. At that instant, Stein began to accumulate an electric charge. He turned on full power mode, after which he instantly jumped at the werewolf. Stein needs to kill the mountain god as quickly as possible before his power heals him. Stein began throwing numerous and lightning-fast punches. Victoria began to use a healing spell. The elder werewolf saw it. So we can't beat them if any damage is instantly healed. The elder werewolf lunged at Victoria, but the witch could not be defeated easily. She quickly turned around and grabbed the werewolf's face with her hand. After which, she threw it at the mountain god with all her might. Stein struck a fatal blow, and a powerful charge engulfed the werewolves. They're done. But at that time, the locals had already come closer. They saw the defeated god and the elder. They could not believe it. The villagers were horrified. They looked at the one who had killed their deity, and they just started running away. A monster and a witch. The story of them will always be remembered by the people of this village. Stein walked over to the corpse of the mountain god and placed his hand on his throat. I think the doctor went south, said Stein. That's it? That's all the information we got. Stein, only you can read monsters. Make more of an effort, Victoria said unhappily. At this time, Anna and her brother ran to the children's aid. All the adults are gone. What are we supposed to do? Joshua wondered. All the children were plunged into a drug-induced slumber. I don't know, Anna cried. For the past 3 years, I have considered this village my home and its people my new family. Now we have no home. Now we have nowhere to go. Stein and Victoria walked past the children and told her friend not to interfere. Our goal has been achieved, the girl said. We defeated the mountain god. We got the information. We also saved the children, even though it was not our plan. But Stein was no longer listening to Victoria. He ran to Anna, who was sitting on the ground crying. You're Anna, aren't you? The monster asked. I have something for you. Stein held some paper in his hand and said he was given this by the guy who died the day before yesterday. Is that David? Anna asked. Stein began the story. That day, Victoria and I went into the forest, and then we heard someone yelling for help. It was the guy who was attacked by the werewolf. I immediately rushed to his rescue. I killed the werewolf with one punch. The second hunter screamed, Anna, for help, after which he fell to the ground. And then you came running up, Anna, with some hunter. But when you saw me, you shot and ran away. Stein continued to tell the story. I asked Victoria to help these people, that she would heal their wounds. Victoria approached them. Unfortunately, even her magic was already useless against against such wounds. Before he died, the guy said a few words. A village. Werewolves. Then he gave me a note of some kind. Anna. Children. Escape, he whispered. It's an opportunity for salvation. I told him he could count on me. Then we found your village. We would never have thought there could be a village in the middle of nowhere. I told Victoria I wanted to help the kids of the guy who died. Victoria responded by calling me a fool. After all, we have to get information about monsters. I was angry. All right, you're still gonna do it your way. But just so you know, I'm not promising to help you with this, said Victoria. I thanked her. Victoria told me not to talk at all in the village. It's easy to get into the village, but getting information is the challenge. My appearance definitely needs work. And hide the weapons. Weak. That's the kind of people who can take an opponent by surprise, Victoria said, and then she cut off my arm. That's how it was. I think David gave me a map to get through the woods. David had apparently managed to discover the secret of the village and planned to rescue the children. Even knowing he was at risk of being killed, David still wanted to help you. His real family, even though the village was fake, your relationship with each other was real. Be strong, and even in this fake world, you're bound to find your real home one day. I believe that. After saying that, Stein and Victoria turned around and left. Wait, Joshua shouted. Thank you for your help. Will I ever see you again? Forget about us. And don't tell anyone, Victoria replied. We are the Wicked Witch and Frankenstein's monster after all. Where we go, we leave destruction in our wake. What are you going to do now? Joshua asked. Let's turn this world upside down, Victoria said with a smirk. Something like that. I guess. The story takes us to a certain city. There was a woman running down the street. She was running from someone. It was the guards. They were yelling, "Get the witch. Don't let her escape." A bearded man stood in the woman's way. He did not react in any way to what was happening. Get out of my way. The woman shouted and pulled out a knife. When she tried to stab the man, he made a grab for her arm, after which he threw it on the ground. Let me go, screamed the woman. At that moment, the guards surrounded them and pointed their muskets. I curse you. I curse everyone. Every fucking soldier and every single person in this town. Shut your mouth. The soldiers shouted and beat the woman. When the man saw Colonel Howard, he saluted. Thank you for your help. Joseph, the colonel said in reply. Even after being discharged, Joseph's combat skills are top-notch. The colonel remarked, well, let's see what you're really like, Colonel Howard said, and pulled out a silver pendant. He then placed the pendant on the hand of the captured woman. Witches and werewolves get burns when they come in contact with silver. In other words, this woman is a witch, as expected of Commander Howard. The military police did a good job. People in the crowd shouted, as long as there are military police, as long as Desmond Howard. Live. The peace and quiet of this city will be secure, shouted the colonel. Long live the military police. Hail to the kingdom of Huperia, shouted the crowd of locals. It had been 2 months since the werewolf had been defeated. Victoria and Stein were walking through the forest. It was raining. We haven't been able to get any information about Frankenstein lately, said Victoria. Plus, it's been raining since this morning. It couldn't be worse. I love the scenery after the rain. I hope to see some beautiful scenery today too, Stein said excitedly. And then they heard some loud sound. It was a gunshot, and our heroes ran towards the sound. There were 2 people in the middle of the forest, surrounded by werewolves. Just try to come any closer. The man with the sword in his hand shouted. The pack of werewolves looked at the humans with hungry eyes. Stein wanted to help the defenseless people, but Victoria stopped him. You have to stop wasting your power like this, said the witch. Don't use your power without my permission. It is your mistress's command. At that second, the child who was with the man screamed in fright and cried. Stein couldn't stand it any longer and rushed to his aid. You chose to ignore my orders, Victoria shouted angrily. I will not use force, Stein replied as he ran, so there's no violation of the order. Stein took down a werewolf that was trying to attack the humans. They were surprised. The man shouted, who the hell are you? A pack of werewolves swarmed toward Stein. He was just beating them with his fists. Stein was flipping off the monsters one by one. A knife went flying, and it hit it right on target, between the werewolf's eyes. I understand that you don't need strength to control your body, but you don't need to jump out like that for the sake of impressions, said Victoria. For a moment, Stein couldn't move his arm. However, with such an opponent, he can handle it. The werewolf pack was already shrinking before his eyes. Stein was knocking one after another to the ground with his stone blows. During the fight, one of the werewolves managed to bite the big man's shoulder. Stein screamed in pain. Victoria slit the werewolf's neck. That was the last one. We're the reason you suffered. We are very grateful for our rescue, said the child. This is the first time werewolves have come to these parts. It was safe until recently, said the man. To be more precise, they were mad wolves. They have the same body structure and have the same power as werewolves, but they are stupid beasts that can't turn into humans. He's pretty good with monsters, said Victoria. He's probably military. That could be a problem. We're leaving. Tell me, are you going to Wolfspendal by any chance? Asked the child. Victoria asked. Do you know the way there? We live there. I can show you the neighborhood? The child answered. He has a stomachache, Victoria said and pointed her finger at Stein. If you show us the way, we'll run as fast as we can into town. Our heroes headed into town. Stein thanked his friend for her help with the werewolves, and Victoria responded by kicking her ass for disobeying her orders. They approached the gate, and then our heroes are stopped by some soldier. Armed guards were everywhere and surrounded. What's that supposed to mean? Victoria asked. It's all about uncovering your true nature. To see if you're a werewolf or a witch. Victoria couldn't agree to that. She was thinking of ways to get away. But here, a voice from behind. Colonel Howard, this is Joseph and May. I have something to say about these two, said the man. Our heroes have already begun to worry. Earlier today, we were attacked by crazy wolves in the woods. And these two saved us, Joseph said. You'll probably be checking their belongings. Among them are the weapons they used to save us. So you were strong enough to deal with the mad wolves? Colonel Howard asked in surprise. Oh, come on. It's all about the fact that I have a pretty strong partner, Victoria said with a smile. He is ex-military and has been in combat, so he knows how to fight werewolves. And the scars on his body are from his time in the service. The hood and bandages are necessary to hide the ugliness of the skin and the scars. Regarding the test, could you tell me what it is? Victoria asked. There's nothing ordinary about it. Just let me touch your skin with this silver pendant, answered the colonel. Nothing will happen to a human in this situation, but a witch or a werewolf will get a burn. Victoria held out her hand and motioned for the inspection to begin. Stein wondered what Victoria was up to. From the looks of it, it's all good, said the colonel. Stein had questions in his mind. Come on, Stein, let them check you out, too, said Victoria. Stein held out his hand, and the colonel made the inspection. You seem to be doing well. Welcome, said Howard. Please forgive me for being so rude. However, werewolves and witches often infiltrate this town, so we have no choice but to devote our energies to security. I thank you for saving Joseph, said Howard and saluted. He, like you, is ex-military and one of our comrades. Stein saluted back. Our heroes walked into town. Phew. Stein exhaled. I thought they were going to figure it out. I was tense. Look, Victoria, can silver really reveal a witch's essence? Stein asked. Or was it one of your tricks that saved us? Victoria didn't have time to respond. They caught up with her. I'm sorry, May said. I can't let go of people I haven't thanked. Could you be invited to our restaurant? We'd love to come in. I might, Stein replied. You've been a little too AWOL lately, said Victoria. I'm sorry, May screamed. You were in a hurry to get to town, and you got held up by the inspection, and now I'm still here. It's okay, said Victoria. You don't have to worry so much. He couldn't take it anymore and did his business on the side of the road. Stein felt ashamed. They went into the restaurant. Have a seat, Joseph said. We are located on the outskirts of the city, so there are few visitors, but we are not inferior when it comes to cooking. I'll go make you something to eat, May said and left. Let me examine your bite wound, said Victoria. As expected, regeneration is complete. A wound like this doesn't even need to be treated. After a while, the food was ready, and our heroes began their meal. This is incredibly delicious, Stein praised the food. Joseph looked at Stein and said, You're covered in scars. You must have been in some brutal battles. Was it a war of bloody war? It was a battle between humans and werewolves and witches. It was a war that had plagued humanity for 3 whole years, almost 20 years ago. That's right, said Stein. At that moment, the chair moved away and Joseph rose abruptly from it. He saluted and said that he respected Stein immensely. Glory to Huperius, he shouted. Stein was a little confused, but without a moment's hesitation, he stood up from the table and saluted back. Then he shouted, Yes, glory. Joseph, did you take part in that war too? Stein asked. Yes, the man answered. Not on the front lines. Of course, however, our unit also fought the monsters. Almost the entire unit was killed. But I managed to survive. I still can't forget the horror that happened to my companions. There were bodies, lots of corpses. Some of them deformed by the magic of vile witches. Dismembered corpses that had been torn apart by the claws and teeth of werewolves. A groaning soldier dragging his nearly severed leg, which was held together only by a thin layer of skin. Every werewolf and witch, every monster must be exterminated. That's it. That's enough, said May. Let our visitors just eat in peace. I was wondering, who do you two think you are? You two have such a nice conversation, Stein asked. She's an abandoned child. I had no choice but to take care of her. Joseph replied. What about you? What brings you here? May asked. We're looking for someone. I won't give you all the details, but he's quite troubled. There are some strange things happening in the places he's been, Victoria answered. Have you had anything strange happen to you lately? Perhaps it could be related to the man we're looking for. If you could tell us, it might be of some use to us, Stein asked. I doubt very much that anything strange is going on in the city. Joseph replied. The military police know what they're doing. As long as they are here, the city can sleep well. Peace in this city is maintained through the efforts of Cole. Howard, the colonel, is the commander of the military police, as well as the commandant of the city. He can find every witch and werewolf that has been hiding among the humans. Howard, is he the one who checks silver? Victoria asked. Yes, Joseph replied. So far, we've already managed to identify over 100 werewolves and witches. Stein and Victoria were a little surprised. 9 years ago, I served under a colonel, and since then, silver has been used to detect werewolves and witches. According to you, over 100 witches were caught, right? And just how did they manage such a large number? Victoria asked. The colonel's handing them over to a special unit from the capital. Ordinary people like you probably haven't even heard of them. Joseph replied, this special unit to fight werewolves and witches is called the Silver Hunters. Looks like they're connected to the military police and they're after you. The result of Frankenstein's research, Victoria whispered to Stein, out comes the scumbag who killed my mother is a hero of justice from a special military police unit, the Silver Hunters. Our heroes left the restaurant and walked through the town. They met a local woman and asked if strange things had happened in the town lately. Our town is peaceful. Nothing strange happens here, the woman replied. Even more so, the commander unlocks the essence of monsters with silver, and even if a werewolf and a witch infiltrate the city, they can be easily identified by whether they wear silver jewelry or not. There are often travelers here, but we still feel safe, because the military police do not slumber and check everyone. Have you ever personally seen a werewolf or a witch arrested? Victoria asked. Many times, the woman answered, and every time, I get a flutter in my chest. But a captured werewolf could turn into a wolf, and no one had ever seen a captured witch use magic. Victoria wondered, even a thief will resist desperately when cornered. So why do your werewolves and witches put up such a good fight and get captured so easily? And okay, if there were one or two, but no, none of the ones arrested as monsters have done anything about it. Doesn't that seem kind of unnatural? Victoria asked. You're in cahoots with the monsters, screamed the woman. You're trying to confuse us and incite us to rebel against the military police. You won't succeed. After these words, the woman called the military police for help. Stein briefly apologized for his rudeness and then grabbed Victoria and ran away. Our heroes tried to get some information from the locals, but no one gave answers to the questions related to the military police. Everyone was angry and drove them away. I've more or less figured out what this town is all about, and I've decided that it's better if we don't stay here for long, said Victoria. Meanwhile, Colonel Howard decided to pay Joseph a visit. Hello, Joseph, he said. Good to see you. How are you doing? I hope the young guests are doing well. Along with the colonel was another soldier. He knew Joseph. Victoria, Stein. Someone called out to our heroes. It was May. She said hello and offered them breakfast. Victoria and Stein agreed. Afterwards, they walked together to the restaurant. After a while, the table was full of food. There are no other visitors right now anyway. So if you want a refill, just tell me, said May. Why aren't there any visitors here? Victoria asked. The food here is so good, especially the root vegetable soup. It's very good. Yeah, everybody likes the soup, said May. But because of the unfortunate location, we don't have an influx of new customers. Our regular customers are only Joseph's acquaintances. Although retired, Joseph seems to have maintained a good relationship with the military police. Why did he leave the service? Victoria asked. It happened before Joseph and I met. Some witch had cut his leg with a knife during an arrest. Joseph was still a military police officer at the time. He's been limping ever since. Apparently, he had no choice but to resign. That's why he hates witches so much. Joseph's family and friends died in the Blood Moon War, hence his obsession with the military. After the meal, our heroes thanked May and left the restaurant. But the girl caught up with them. Wait a minute, she shouted. When I went to the market today to buy groceries, I heard that a witch had appeared in the neighboring village. I thought it might have something to do with who you are looking for. Thank you. That might be helpful, said Victoria. Our heroes said goodbye to May and left. Night has fallen. Joseph and May were still awake. Suddenly, something began to happen to the girl's hands. Why are your hands glowing? Joseph asked in surprise. So you're a witch? You're a monster. The sun has risen. It's morning. Our heroes had already woken up and were leaving the inn. The only information they got was a rumor that there was a witch in the neighboring town. There's nothing left to do in this town. It's time to leave. Victoria, why don't we come in and say hello to Joseph and May before we leave this town? Stein asked. But Victoria replied that there was no need for that. They moved toward the exit, but stopped. There was a large crowd of people in front of them. Our heroes went through the crowd to find out what was going on here. The crowd of people were screaming, as expected from the military police. Another witch captured. Now we could breathe a sigh of relief. When Stein and Victoria got closer, they saw a girl. Is that May? Stein wondered. After that, Victoria got really angry and just ran away. Where she ran to, Stein couldn't even guess, but he ran after her. Victoria opened the front door of the restaurant wide open and ran inside. Joseph was sitting at one of the tables. He was already drunk, but he was still drinking alcoholic beverages. Victoria asked, "Why was May arrested and everyone around her thinks she's a witch?" "I saw her hands glowing myself," Joseph replied. "May was a witch. That's why she was arrested." After saying that, Victoria ran up to Joseph in a frenzy and grabbed his clothes. She was yelling really loud, "You bastard. You turned her into the military police yourself. You hate witches so much that you turned in your own child?" Stein grabbed Victoria and told her to stop. Joseph fell to the floor. "She turned herself into the military police. The deputy commander told me that," Joseph replied. "I went to the military station and found out she was there. The deputy said that May came to the checkpoint, after which she flashed a magic light and confessed to being a witch. Apparently, she has just awakened her magic and can't use it freely yet. The reason she surrendered instead of running away, according to her, is that she doesn't want to hurt people. She'll be handed over to the Silver Hunters like the other witches." "Do you know what fate awaits the witch who was handed over to the Silver Hunters?" Victoria asked. In response, Joseph only lowered his head. "I saw with my own eyes the witch who was captured by the Silver Hunters and burned alive," said Victoria. "And you're going to let May, who's like your own child, just die like that?" Victoria then ran out of the restaurant. Joseph was still sitting on the floor. "It was all my fault," he said. "When I saw May's hands light up, I was scared. I remembered a battle with a witch. I was with my companion, and before my eyes, a witch used magic to kill him. I was weak, so I grabbed the knife. Then he put it to May's throat. She was afraid. She looked at me and said she didn't blame me for reacting that way. After all, witches are monsters." She was crying. Tears were running down her cheeks. She said, "I'm leaving." After the story, Joseph lowered his head and cried. Stein ran after Victoria. "Victoria, I'm going to save May," said Stein. "Come on," Victoria replied. "You said we'd leave when we were done with all the business?" Stein said in surprise. Victoria replied that there was one more thing to do, and it was about saving May. Our heroes walked towards the military police station. They stopped near a tree that grew opposite. Victoria went on a reconnaissance mission. "What is it?" Stein asked. "I have a general idea of the outer structure of the site, but how inside and how we can find the place where May is kept, I have no idea," Victoria answered. "Hey, you!" someone yelled. It was a soldier who saw them. "Why are you hanging around the military police station?" the officer asked. Just then, Joseph appeared and quickly knocked the soldier out. "Are you looking for the place where May is being held?" he asked. Our heroes were surprised. They didn't expect to see him here. They entered the property. Joseph started picking the lock. Stein stood at attention. Joseph opened the door of some kind of room. "There shouldn't be any military police here at this time. We are in the dead zone of the station for now," he said. "The witch and werewolf cells are separate from the human cells. They are in an isolated area and are usually empty. We managed to bypass the guards and there should be no one in our way now." "What made you change your mind?" Victoria asked. "I have arrested many witches over the years, but when my own family became witches, I couldn't just sit idly by," Joseph replied. "And now you have before you just a hypocrite who betrayed the military police to whom he owes so much for so many things. I decided to let go of my past and my beliefs that made me who I am now. You're a man first, then a soldier," Stein said with a smirk. They were isolation cells where witches and werewolves were kept. Our heroes have checked all the cells. Oh, no, they're all empty. Has she already been taken and given to the Silver Hunters? We're too late," said Joseph. Victoria stood there silent. But suddenly she heard something. She ran to the wall. Victoria said she could feel a draft, that there was something behind the wall. "Stein, help," she said. Stein began to lift a large slab of stone. Victoria was right. There was a passage behind the wall that led down to a staircase. "What is it?" Joseph wondered. "I've been here for over 10 years and I don't know anything about this underground passage." They went down there. The tunnel was quite long. He led our heroes to some kind of door. "It was some kind of living quarters. I'm familiar with it," said Joseph. "It's the way things are furnished here." "It is Colonel Howard's mansion. Why is there a secret passage from the place where werewolves and witches are kept to the Colonel's residence?" Our heroes wondered about this. There was another door. Stein opened it. What he saw was horrible. In this room were shelves on which jars of human heads were arranged. Our heroes were terrified. They didn't understand a thing. "What's going on here?" Meanwhile, May woke up. She didn't know where she was or what was going on here. There was a woman near her and she was shouting something. May looked around. She saw many human heads in jars that were neatly arranged on shelves. May was frightened. "Wake up already?" Some voice could be heard from upstairs. That was Colonel Howard. May cried out in tears. "Help us. We woke up in this strange place. Now, listen to me carefully, said the colonel. You are about to be attacked by werewolves. May was horrified. What? What werewolves? Now run, find a way out, or you'll be eaten by werewolves. Colonel Howard shouted with delight. I thought you said you were going to hand me over to the Royal Army of the capital. Get me out of here, the woman screamed. Run, said Howard. Nathan, Vincent, show me how you can hunt. The women ran. It's just as I suspected. My hunch that there was something wrong with the military police turned out to be true. May reasoned. As soon as I tried to tell the people of the town about the weirdness, they accused me of being a witch, and no matter how much I denied it, they didn't believe me and arrested me. I curse, damn those military police for doing this to me, and all the townspeople for not listening to me. The woman screamed, Don't follow me. The werewolves will catch us all at once. The woman shouted to May. May ran the other way. She was in tears, and a werewolf jumps out from the side into a friend. He claws May. She fell to the floor. The werewolf had hurt her, and blood began to flow from the wound. The werewolf was desperate. He thought he could finish the girl off with one blow, but he couldn't. May stood up. She pressed her wound, went, Don't you dare run away. You made me embarrass myself in front of my father, said the werewolf. May walked over to one of the shelves and stopped. When the werewolf came closer, she grabbed one of the jars that was on the shelf and threw it on the floor in front of the monster. The jar shattered, and the human head that was inside ended up on the floor. What do you think you're doing? This is my father's collection. Now I'm gonna get scolded, said the werewolf. While the werewolf was distracted, May turned around and walked away. She was trying to delay more and more to increase her chances of survival. Oh, no. The werewolf caught up with the girl, though he struck her with his claws from the back, and May fell bloody to the floor. A huge gash was visible on her back. Oh, shit. The werewolf screamed. I failed to kill her again. The girl's a tenacious and agile creature, like a cockroach. May lay there. She asked for no mercy. She only remembered Joseph and whispered his name through her tears. The werewolf glared at May and was startled. She had a cut on her face. A second werewolf came up to him and started taunting him. I did it. This werewolf held the head of the woman who was with May in his hand. He said, Please take a look at how carefully I managed to remove the head. I'm sure father will be very unhappy with you. If you damaged her face, she can't be added to father's collection. The werewolf was angry. He wasn't happy with himself. Quiet, he shouted. The werewolf walked up to May. He was very angry. Creature, this is all your fault, shouted he, because you tried to run away. I am so dishonored in front of my father. After saying that, the werewolf began to beat May's body with its claws over and over again. More and more blood spilled out. The girl didn't make a sound. You're going to pay for this? The werewolf shouted. The werewolf stopped hitting May. He stood over her body and watched her bleed to death. He had no emotion for her. May began to lose consciousness. She could no longer feel her body. The colonel watched it all with his wife. They expected nothing less. An unseemly hunt. Oh, Nathan. And why is it that only my boy is so impulsive? Said the woman. He's my child. So why is he so untalented? The colonel said grudgingly. Is he so comfortable in high society that he's forgotten his werewolf instincts? All because his mother is a low-grade werewolf? The woman felt ashamed. She couldn't listen to it. It's amazing. She's alive, said the werewolf as he looked at May's body. She had passed out from shock. I purposely didn't hit her vital organs, so I could torture her longer. Well, the hell with you. If you're doing this to me, I'm just gonna eat you. Hopefully. You'll at least taste good. After saying that, the werewolf opened his mouth and began to eat. At that moment, someone's hand appeared. It closed the werewolf's mouth. It was Stein. He was holding the werewolf's mouth. The werewolf was shocked. He hadn't expected this. Stein shouted, Are you interested in the taste? Then try this. After saying that, he lifted the werewolf by its jaws into the air. He threw him to the floor and pinned him down. Stein finished off the werewolf with one punch. The second werewolf stood aghast and held the woman's head in his hand. He didn't know what was happening. What kind of creature are you? The werewolf asked. Our heroes rushed to May's aid. Joseph and Victoria were horrified when they saw May's body. It was covered in blood. Victoria examined the wounds. She began to use healing magic. Joseph was surprised. What's going on? Joseph looked at Victoria and asked, So you're a witch, too? But Victoria thought that question didn't need an answer, and she stayed focused on the process. Joseph, listen carefully, Victoria said. Her wound is healing. It was really true. May's wound was really beginning to heal. It is my magic that heals May. I absorb her soul energy and stimulate the healing of her body. But along with the dying body, slowly the soul also weakens. And if at such a moment the energy of the soul is exhausted, it may happen that its wounds will heal, but it will still die because of the absence of the soul. However, leaving May in the state she's in now will likely cost her her life as well. We don't have time to physically heal the wound. So I want you to take her by the hand and give her the will to live with your support. That should strengthen her spirits a bit. and her chances of surviving my treatment will increase. At this time, the werewolf stood staring at Stein. "How dare you do this to my brother?" he screamed. "You don't know who you're messing with. We're the Howard family. You're not getting out of here alive." The werewolf threw himself at Stein. Stein wasn't the least bit intimidated by this, and as soon as the werewolf ran closer, Stein sealed the werewolf's head into the floor with one blow. Victoria was a little surprised at how Stein was able to kill a werewolf with a single blow, and without using force. "Victoria," Stein said, "I won't let anyone get in your way. You just save May." "Of course, and you don't lose control," Victoria replied.